Hi everyone, welcome to lesson number 16 on our persuasive writing unit. So we are getting ourselves ready now to start your assessment planning, and today your title up above is planning an argument. So our objective for today's lesson will be to analyse what we call logical fallacies and flaws in arguments. So we're going to be looking today at using the work we've done so far on structuring arguments to complete a plan or a rough version of an argument about climate change. Now we're working with the genre of letter writing, so all of the persuasive work that we do is going to be designed at letter writing to target our government, to try and persuade them to take more action on climate change. As I've said in the previous videos, if you want to argue from the other side and you want to argue that actually we're spending too much time thinking about climate change and not enough time on and maybe some other issues that you think are equally or more important, you need to contact me directly and run that idea past me before you write your assessment, okay? Just so I can make sure that you've got strong arguments on both sides of your case. Right, so let's get going with today's starter. So as I have said in all of the videos so far, it's really important that you have completed the lessons in the right order, in the right sequence, so that you build your skills up piece by piece. And so that if you followed that structure, then you're ready for this lesson. If not, please go check out those previous videos before you launch into the content for this one. Okay, and that being said then, your starter up there. So it's a discussion, or it would have been in class, but I want you to now answer this individually in your book or on some paper. How conscious do you think you are of your carbon footprint? And I've given you some statements here to have a think about. So as part of your lifestyle, do you think about your consumption of plastic, how much meat you are consuming, how you travel to and from school, do you recycle, including clothes, etc.? And are you conscious of your waste, including energy and water? So are you thinking about things like whether you're leaving your gadgets all plugged in when perhaps they don't need to be, lights left on, etc.? Are you kind of conscious of the amount of water you're using? Okay, so use those bullet points there. And then answer the starter for yourselves in your book. I want a couple of sentences to explain how conscious you think you are of your carbon footprint. That means of the impact that you individually are having on climate change. So work your way through the bullet points here. You can answer them individually, so you could work through an answer for each bullet point, but you need to write in complete sentences so that if I look back at your book, hopefully soon, I will be able to understand what you are answering because you've used the words within the question. Do that now, guys, and then pause the video. Okay, so having answered the starter, now for the challenge. Summarise your views on climate change in 100 words exactly. So I really want you to use your editorial skills to concentrate on the number of words that you're using, really think about what your views on climate change are, but learn how to keep to a really specific word count. It's a good exercise. What I suggest you do is that you write out in general your ideas about climate change, aiming for a small paragraph, and then you want to go through, count up how many words that came to, and then think about how you could cut unnecessary words or how you could rephrase to shorten your expressions. Okay, so have fun with the challenge, do that now, pause the video, and I'll see you on the next slide. Okay guys, so we are now going to talk about specious reasoning or logical fallacy. Now you likely have never heard of these words before, and I've given you a definition up here. So you need to copy this into your books or onto your paper now. So you're copying the definition in the white box here. So specious reasoning means giving an argument with a logical fallacy, which means a problem in the argument. It might sound logical, but it isn't true. So for an example, have a look at our penguin over here. Penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. Logic another thing that penguins aren't very good at. So the point being that although the argument might sound logical, it in fact is flawed, or there's a problem with it. And that flaw is what we call the logical fallacy. And specious reasoning is the whole process of giving an argument with a logical fallacy. So your task now, copy that definition of specious reasoning and logical fallacy into your books, highlight the word specious reasoning and the phrase logical fallacy as well. And you can give the example of the penguin if you wish. Okay, so do that now, pause the video. Okay, for your next task then, we're looking at the grey box here. How is the penguin demonstrating specious reasoning? So you know what it is from your definition. You've got the worked example here. Now, how is that specious reasoning? What is the flaw or the logical fallacy in the penguin's argument? So you need to start your answer for this task by saying that the penguin demonstrates specious reasoning because there is a logical fallacy in its argument. That fallacy is, and then tell me what is wrong with the statement there. Why isn't it accurate? Okay, then for your challenge, we're going to fix the syllogism to correct the logical fallacy. So in last lesson, we looked at what a syllogism is, and we used Greta Thunberg's speech as an example for us to understand how she constructs an argument. In basic form, a syllogism is two premises, so one main premise followed by a shorter premise, that means like your line of argument or your statement, and then equals a conclusion. So our premise number one up here, penguins are black and white. Okay, your premise number two, some TV shows are black and white. Okay, and then number three is your conclusion, therefore some penguins are old TV shows. Okay, so it's one statement, two statements, conclusion. All right, now I'm going to ask you to fix that. So how would you rewrite that to make it make sense? Okay, what could you rewrite about penguins being black and white to make the argument actually correct? So your second premise will need to be rewritten. Some old TV shows are black and white. You need to rewrite that, something else about black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. You'll need a different conclusion at that point too. This is just your challenge. So if that's like way too complex and difficult, please leave that. That's for people that need more challenge and stretch with the activities. Don't worry if that seems intimidating. Give it a go if you can though. And I'd love to hear what you come up with. Please message me with your answers. Okay, so in the previous video, I showed you Greta Thunberg's speech here, Our House is Falling Apart, and we are rapidly running out of time, her speech to the EU Parliament in 2019. And I'm not going to reread that whole speech for you now, because you can go back and look at last lesson and the lesson before to find this speech and rewatch it on there, okay? And you need to download this speech. It is in the description, so you just need to click on that and download the link to it, and then you'll have a copy of it to have a look at. You're going to need it for the next task, so make sure you do that now. Pause the video. Once you've downloaded it, you'll be ready for the next task. Okay, so having either gone back and watched one of the previous videos where I read you Greta's speech, or having downloaded and reread Greta's speech, you're now going to answer the question up here. How does Greta Thunberg structure her argument in a persuasive way? And I've given you a different marking system for this. So imagine that you can give yourself 1 point for every word that you hit in the red circle over here, 3 points for every amber circle, and 5 for every word in the green circle. So as you can see, the more that you can use from the inner circle here, the more marks you can get for this answer. I want you to write a paragraph that explains how Greta Thunberg is structuring her argument in a persuasive way. You should now have plenty of information on this. I've taught you how she structures her argument and also how she uses persuasive language language features in her speeches in previous lessons. If you want to branch out and talk about any of her other speeches, you are free to do that, and you can find links to those on YouTube. So feel free to go research that, choose to write on a different speech if you wish, but you're answering how she is writing arguments in a persuasive way. And I'm going to ask you to write that trying to hit as many of the words in these circles as you can. So you will need to answer on things like her use of syllogisms, which is that premise plus premise equals conclusion structure, her use of methods like fire actions, her use of direct address, her use of sarcasm, etc. Okay, her use of emotive language, and as many of these keywords as you can build into that. All right, so have a go at writing that now. You want to pause the video, re-watch her speeches, reread the articles that we have used for this unit so far, and then have a go at writing at least one paragraph using the words in the circles here. If you can get more from the green circle, the better. Okay, have a go at doing that now and pause the video. Right, so we are now going to do some feedback on how you've done on writing to answer the question above. So you are going to be marking this in your green pen as usual, and you are going to be counting up your references to 1 point for every word from the red circle, 3 points for every word from the amber circle, and 5 for the green circle. You want to reread your work and correct any spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes that you can spot along the way, and then give yourself a total number of points. Make sure that your work isn't just an incoherent ramble of the words that are on here. It needs to flow, it needs to make sense, and it needs to be equally logically written, okay? So I'm not looking for you just to have strung all these words together. It needs to flow to make a cohesive argument. And then give yourself a total in green pen for the number of points you acquired for that task. Well done. Okay, so the point of the last couple of exercises where we've looked at specious reasoning, logical fallacies and Greta's structure is to remind you about how important thinking through the flow of your argument is. What makes Greta's speeches so persuasive and effective is that she's really thought about the order and sequence of her arguments, and she builds it up to really have that emotional impact on her audience. And it's going to be important, if we're going to write persuasively for your assessment, that you know how to do that effectively to pick up marks. Okay, so that being said, the point in talking to you about the specious reasoning and logical fallacies is to make it very clear for you that you have to be very careful about how you formulate those arguments. You need to make sure that you're not putting across two premises that don't necessarily hold logical weight. You want your arguments to be truthful, okay? So unlike the fake news that we all encounter, I'm asking you to write from a place of truth. That means that I don't want to see logical fallacies, and I don't want to see specious reasoning. I don't want you to be arguing something that has no genuine backing in reality. I'm asking you to write from a genuine place of knowledge, information and truth as best you can about what you think about climate change. So your task is going to be to write a piece arguing that climate change needs to be addressed more and more urgently by our government, okay? And our target audience for this is going to be your local MP. You do not, in reality, have to send this off to your MP. It'd be wonderful if some of you decide that you want to do that, but this is not about politics. This is about learning the skills to write persuasively that you may need later in life when perhaps there is an issue you feel really passionately needs to be addressed. Okay, so it's not about the politics. Should you wish to pass it on, you are free to do that, and maybe let me know. I'd love to know what you do with these, but that is not compulsory. We're just learning the skills in formulating those arguments. So I'm going to talk you through now what this planning framework is, and again the link to this is in the description. You need to download it and use it as a guide. Don't worry if you can't print this off, it's not a big deal, okay? You can just copy the sequence out into your book and following it step by step. So every time there's an arrow, it directs you from one task to the next, and you just follow those, and I'm going to talk you through how you can do that effectively in a moment. But you want to download that worksheet anyway so that you have have the questions in front of you and you can work your way through them logically. All right, so let's talk about that in a bit more detail now. Right, so this is your planning sheet. So you're going to start over here with your main argument. So this is where you're going to write down something like main argument. I'd use that as a little subheading in my book. I may, because I'm visual, I probably would copy out the boxes and the arrows, but you don't have to. You can do this in whatever way makes sense to you at home. You know, you've got your own minds about what the kind of learning style that works best for you, but you need to make sure that you follow the steps in order. So I would copy down a subtitle of main argument, and here your main argument will be that climate change is an ever increasing urgent issue that we need to take seriously and we need to do more to try to prevent and address, and that as a country we have a responsibility to help in that global fight. Okay, so that might be my main argument. You can put that into whatever words you think are powerful and persuasive, and you should think about how you could use, if we follow the arrow here, facts and statistics to back up your initial argument. So this is effectively like your opening statement in your letter. Okay, so what kind of facts or statistics could you use? You can go back and rewatch the earlier lessons where we looked at the facts on climate change. You can also look it up via NASA. NASA has a lot of information out there about the real impact of climate change and the measurements that they have done that evidence the impact it's having globally. So my top recommendation would be go back, watch those earlier videos, do some research now, Google some statistics and some facts on climate change and plan those out here. You don't have to write this up in formal paragraphs yet. You're collecting information, collecting phrases that you will use in your write-up. This is just our plan. Okay, so have a go at doing that now. Pause the video and complete the first step, and then we'll talk through the next steps. Okay, so the next step, if we follow the arrow down, it's to outline your issue using I, so your use of personal pronouns here, I or my. So I want you to be saying about in my opinion, or I consider this to be an urgent issue. I want you to use that first person perspective to add some impact, make us care about why you care about this. Okay, so you want to plan out a phrase about climate change using I or my. Then you want to try to build in some ethos to your argument. So you might, for example, say that having watched Greta Thunberg, you're playing on her ethos, her reputation there, you are aware of, and then share one of the stats or facts that she gives us in one of her speeches. That's backing up your argument with some credibility because you're citing someone else who is really well known for the issue, and using ethos will strengthen your argument here. Okay, so pause the video and complete that stage. Okay, so having finished this box here, again, you should have either copied down the subtitle to label what stage that is on your books, or you're copying out the diagram entirely, and that's fine as well. So you've answered your issue using I or my, and you've made some sort of reference to ethos, whether that's a figure like Greta Thunberg or David Attenborough. You're drawing on other well-known figures to support your argument. Then you're going to think about fire actions, and I want you to choose 2 techniques to now add phrases to what you've planned here. So I want you to choose 2 of your other techniques. So you might choose to use a repetition or a rhetorical question, and you might choose to perhaps use something like sarcasm or alliteration. It's up to you which 2 you choose. If you look down the planning grid here, you've got opportunities at various other points in your plan to add in other methods. It doesn't matter if you repeat them. So if you've used a rhetorical question here, you can use one again down here. There's no rule about that. You're aiming to try and use a variety of the methods as you plan it. And I also want you to think about your use of sentence structures. So can you plan a sentence that uses one of these more varied forms of punctuation? For example, your use of the rhetorical question, your use of brackets can be a really effective way of making like a side point or even a sarcastic comment. You can put that in brackets to try and separate it out from the information, but give the reader greater insight into what your real attitude is. So you're going to try and choose two of the techniques there and at least one of these other varieties of punctuation to work into your phrases for this. And you need to plan out what those phrases using those methods and sentence types and punctuation will be. So you're going to plan to use those now and pause the video and complete that. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next books. And this is where you're going to develop your concern about the issue. And here I'm going to ask you to use the direct address of you. So you're going to really try and hold your audience to account. And of course, your audience for this is going to be your local MP and government. So when you say you, imagine that that's who you are talking to. Okay. And this time I want you to think about how you could use a logos to support your argument. So that's you making a really logical argument. You're proving your case. So you might again need to be looking at including some facts or some statistics to support what you're going to say for this one. Okay, now for more of a challenge, if you want to get high marks on this, I'm going to set you the challenge of trying to create a syllogism, a little bit like we saw with the Greta Thunberg piece. So you want to try and follow the structure of premise, conclusion. For example, if you recognise that this percentage of icebergs are decreasing annually, and if you recognise that our mass effect on the temperature of the planet is increasing by, give those statistics, then for your conclusion you'd be arguing, then it is undeniable that we need to do more to change this and to protect our planet. So you make two statements. Both might use some level of fact or statistic to hit your logos, and then for your conclusion, you'd argue why that means that this person, the MP, must care and do more about it. Okay, so complete that task now, pause the video, and then we'll move on. Okay, so for the next task, we're going to think about a counter-argument. So in this paragraph, I'm going to ask you to plan out your counter-argument using the phrase to begin with, some may argue. So you might take on, for example, Tony Abbott's speech where we looked at his arguments against climate change, looking at other causes of climate variation in temperature, like fluctuations in sunspots. So you might say something like, some may argue that humans are not entirely responsible for the effects of global warming. Indeed, renowned figures like Tony Abbott have argued that sunspots are equally important, and therefore some of this is out of our control. That would be the beginning of your counter-argument. You have to finish any counter-argument by showing why that's not entirely correct. So you might want to finish it by saying, however, this is not entirely accurate, or this is only partially true. There is a much bigger picture, and I feel it's important that we address that. Okay, and same as we've done for the other ones, you're going to think of two of your fire actions methods that you could plan phrases for to work into that paragraph, and think about how you could use some various forms of punctuation to enhance that. And in a future video, I will run through for you the different forms of punctuation, how you can use them effectively. Okay. If you're not sure, go Google it. Don't sit there waiting for the next video. Make sure that you have already taken your initiative to work independently and looked up how you could use these to write a sentence accurately. And please do ask. If you've got questions about this, send me drafts of your work, ask your class teacher, or ask somebody at home for some help with it as well. So the next box, we are going to be thinking about really delivering like impact with your paragraph here. This is where I want you to suggest what we can do to make things better. Okay, so this is where you make a plan for change, and I want you to use words like we or our or us here, our inclusive words. Like, it isn't up to me, it is up to all of us to care about climate change and the future of our planet. That would be an example of how you could use it. And again, same thing, try and work in some other of your fire actions methods that you could use to enhance your writing, maybe some really powerful alliteration in there. And again, think of how you could use a variety of punctuation or sentence structures for impact. It can be really, really effective to use a super short sentence for impact, like a 2 or 3 word sentence. This is our future. Really short, really punchy, really effective. So have a play at planning out some of these now, and pause the video. And our final paragraph, we are going to plan out your conclusive statement. So this is where you draw together all of your arguments and really hammer why we need to take more action on climate change and global warming. And this is where you might use phrases like ultimately, or it is clear that, or the time is now to act, to do more. And here I want you to really draw on the pathos, so our emotive arguments. That's appealing to your audience's sense of emotion, to make them care about the topic that you're addressing. So ultimately, we only have one planet. We have short amount of time in which to respond to this potential disaster. So you're using emotive language and you're really trying to make your audience care about the topic, okay? And same as before, you're working on that final box on the side here, fire actions to include. I'd say it's essential for this one that you are building in some emotive language, that you're really thinking about your vocabulary use there to make us care, okay? So this is a structure to help you. Try and work through each box to just plan out phrases and sentences that you could use to write a really persuasive letter about climate change action and why we need to do more as a country to tackle this. Okay, you're only planning, you're not writing the full letter up. Okay, have fun having a plan with that. I really can't wait to read what you produce with this. So just to remind you that these are your fire actions that you want to make sure that you are using across your plan. So you want to have covered probably the majority of these across the whole letter. It's absolutely fine, as I've said in the previous bit of the video where we've looked at the plan, it's absolutely fine if you're repeating some of those particular methods more than others. It will be inevitable that you will use quite a lot of the emotive language. You ought to try to use quite a bit of alliteration if you can, and facts will be essential. The harder ones to use, and the ones that will be more impressive, will be your use of imagery. So that's your similes and metaphors. Think of Greta and the house on fire. And think of sarcasm as well. Sarcasm, remember, you've got to be really careful that you don't alienate your audience into rejecting your ideas by offending them. So you don't want to be overly offensive, but you do want to almost belittle them into making them feel stupid if they don't take action. It's a really fine line. If you want the challenge, try and get the sarcasm in. If you're quite happy to settle without too difficult a level of challenge, stick with aiming for the imagery. That'll still be impressive and still get you high marks, okay? So have a go at building those into your plan now. Right, so what I'd suggest you do, having had a go at planning out your answer, is that you ask for some feedback. Hopefully there is somebody at home who can read your plan and talk you through some of the ideas that you're putting across, and you can ask them, do you think this sounds persuasive? Would this make you care about climate change and our planet? And get some feedback from them on what you could do to improve. You are also, as always, free to share these ideas with your teachers, share your plan, let us have a look at what you're doing, ask for some feedback and we'll gladly give it to you. Also ask each other, get some feedback from friends. If you can take pictures of your work and send them to somebody else and say, got any other ideas on what I could add? Or, you know, pick up the phone, speak to someone, talk it through with them, get some advice, okay? And so the objective today was to go through and plan how you can think about structuring an argument. We've learned about logical fallacies and how to avoid them. And we've also talked about recapping on Greta's structuring technique techniques, and then planned how to structure our own piece on climate change. Okay, hopefully that's given you a bit of a toolkit on how you can start planning a piece. Next lesson we are going to talk through in far more detail how you're actually going to write this up. So I hope you've gained something from today. Don't forget to download all of the links to help you with this, and as always, best of luck with all of your work. Please get in touch. Please let me know that you're all well and okay and coping with it all. Missing you all massively, and well done for sitting through the video. Bye.